I'm very interested to hear you promise something with 666, the number of the beast in
Well,
Solomon, which I always teach every semester in a very superficial way. So I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about it.
no,
And I will.
I,
We should cue
I
up
hate
the Iron Maiden song 666 number.
exactly. I mean, I don't. I mean, I am an Old Testament professor, but I occasionally moonlight as a New Testament scholar. And so a few years back, my good friend Keith Bodner, who teaches in Canada, and I were working on something. He was actually working on a book on kings, and he mentioned that I was editing, and he mentioned an interesting text in Kings, 10:14, actually, and I wrote out in the margin in my editorial script, I've always wanted to write a little essay on this, connecting it to the mark of the beast, because the text in Kings, which is also paralleled in 2 Chronicles 9, I think, says that Solomon received 666 talents of gold annually, and this is just part of what he gets when he kind of gets into his full flow as Emperor Solomon. And so I sent the manuscript back to Keith, and he saw that and he said, "This is a great thing. I thought about this too. Let's do it." So we wrote up this piece, and it was fun because it was kind of really the easiest jointly authored piece I've ever written, and the process of getting it into print was remarkably smooth. And so it was published a few years back, I think in 2020, maybe, in the journal New Testament Studies. But it's not a completely novel idea. There's been other people who've noted that 666 occurs in that passage in Kings because it's such a rare term. I mean, it really occurs in Revelation and this passage in Kings, and it occurs once in a genealogical list in Ezra, a number of people. Yeah. But that's obviously not a really strong connection. But 666 and Solomon, if we kind of pursue Hayes's kind of program, this what he would call metalepsis, this sort of activation of a text, and then you have to kind of tease it out. Does it connect? Does it make sense? What does it do? So the problem with 666, of course, is no one knows what it means, and I don't know what it means either. But the general consensus has been that it's a name, that it refers to a name, and then you kind of, what is it? Is the name in Greek, or is the name in Hebrew or Aramaic? And then is it Nero? Is it Caesar Nero, Nero Caesar? And then you got to spell it differently, and it starts straining credulity.
Yeah, right.
And so maybe it's not a name.
It's just like numerological assessment.
Yeah. Numerological stuff, Bible code kind of stuff. Right. And maybe it's not a name at all. Maybe it's something else. In fact, Revelation doesn't say it's a human name. It says it's a human number. So the 666 thing is obviously a very, stands out. It's like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And so if you think about its placement in the reign of Solomon, it really is part and parcel of his rise to kind of imperial status. And he gets this amount of gold every year.
Right. Which, by the way, is a ton of gold.
Ton of gold.
Depending on which talent, it doesn't matter whether you use the light talent or the heavy talent.
That's right.
Billions of dollars in today's gold market.
Or America God's talent. Either way, you're talking about a lot of talent. So, you kind of look into these kind of, what else is going on in that context? Does it help? And I think it really does. That's what we tried to argue in our essay, Keith and myself, that, there's a connection here between what's kind of going on with the beast and then these kind of rapacious economic, political, policies of Solomon, where he subjects his own people to forced labor. And there's an intertextual link that they use a particular Hebrew word, mas, for forced or conscripted labor that really only occurs elsewhere in Exodus for the Israelites in servitude to Pharaoh. That's a pretty, kind of damning comment. And then there's the thing where he's redistricting. He's kind of gerrymandering for taxation purposes. And then it looks like he's giving his own friends and family and nearby folk breaks. So it looks a little nepotistic. There's all sorts of things that are going on. And then, of course, he ends up, building the temple, but his own palace takes twice as long to construct, and then he builds temples for Chemosh, and then he's marrying everybody and anybody for all kinds of reasons, right? So I think there's this network, as you said, of stuff that Solomon isn't that great of a king, especially at the end of the day, for the people of Israel, and that link, it doesn't do everything for the mark of the beast, but it activates that this figure in Revelation is perhaps similarly rapacious, similarly politically, savvy and really savage, and so on and so forth, and of course into the stuff, into the riches and the power and everything. So that's kind of what we argued, and again, people have seen the connection before, but not really made much of it. Austin Farrer is actually the one who's probably written most about it, but it's just basically a paragraph. So we did what scholars do and wrote 15 pages.
Well, and I think, you mentioned the word metalepsis, which is you're activating another text in people's minds, and not just
Right.
the thought of the other text, but you're actually asking them to pull some of that text over in order to
Yeah.
make sense of what you're saying right now. The example I always use in class, the simple one is, if you're at a workplace and you say, well, I don't want to be a squeaky wheel and amongst the administration, right? You're pulling on that knowledge of the squeaky wheel gets the grease or the oil,
Right.
which again is an analogy about how to behave, and letting people pull that over and finish your thought for you.
Right.
In this case, it also seems like you have Deuteronomy haunting the background here. It's activating multiple networks.
Yeah, that's right.
So Deuteronomy 17, which
Right.
is already a pre-indictment of every single thing that Solomon does, right?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Multiple women, amassing wealth, right? Amassing armies, all the things that you're not supposed to do as a king. He's like
Right.
tick, 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 tick.
Tick. Yeah, that's right.
And then at the end of the day, he not only builds the temple, but he builds all the altars to the other gods, including human sacrifice right above the temple.
Yeah.
So say, knowing all of that, let's just play that whole game out. So now we know all of that, and we come across the beast in Revelation. You're saying the questions we should ask about the beast, this mysterious kind of oblique reference to this person or this thing, it might be a good idea to let the questions we ask generate from that network of ideas that are tagged to 666 first, and then we can kind of figure everything out after. Maybe it constrains the way we can think about the beast.
I think so, because if there is, again, so if there's a strong sense of intertextuality here, then the author of the Apocalypse is intending to echo back to Solomon, and presumably, again, with the help of Hayes and other people who've written about these sorts of dynamics, Ross Wagner or David Lincecum's got a great new book that's coming out about this. These activations, then we want to explore, what does that say? So rather than get involved in like these number game, is it Nero? Is it, I one time heard facetiously, Ronald Wilson Reagan, 6 letters, 6 letters, 6 letters, So, doing all this math, it's not a problem to compute mathematically. It's a trope to be investigated imaginatively with the help of the biblical imagination, and so, or one might say, the biblical mind. And so, if we're doing that, then then we're activating. Oh my gosh, that reminds me of Solomon. And then we read Solomon. Oh my goodness, that reminds me of Deuteronomy 17. And so Solomon is an egregious violation of Torah, and then that means the beast, in egregious violation of Torah, and not just that, the beast or Solomon isn't like, following the 613 laws of the Torah, but like in the way they're running their government, in the way they're treating people, in the way they're showing favoritism and taxation, whatever. These things are part of the negativity that surrounds this aura of negativity and disobedience that surrounds Solomon, and then kind of goes kind of lends its aura or whatever nimbus to the beast as well. Similarly, we could walk it back and say, the use of that text in Revelation also kind of provides further kind of after the fact confirmation that Solomon isn't really all that people think he is.
Right.
So
it acts as a vivid critique of Solomon, in case you didn't read it and pick up what they were laying down in First Kings.
That's right. Now this is like a little binky idea, but I do think it's an example, because there's many others we could use, but it's an example of how, if you know that Solomon story, then this 666 number doesn't come out of the blue as some weird, oh my goodness, Nostradamus, where's my nearest copy of Nostradamus, and I have to do the machinations, and is it March or April of next year that Christ is coming? Instead you're like, oh, this reminds me of Solomon. But if you don't know Solomon's story, if you don't know the Old Testament, that's sort of lost on you, and you just go into flights of fancy of what 666 means and all the rest.
Yeah, it seems like what you're saying, the implications would also be that the Nostradamus, the kind of the mystery cloud that hangs around a lot of the symbolism in Revelation, it just comes down to brass tacks of this. I mean, if we just follow out the logic of what you said, we're talking about we should be on the lookout for leaders who are gaming their economic system to favor whatever they want, that are using corrupt practices to run governments. They're more concerned about security, marriages to multiple women. I think most people would agree that has to do with international security. Amassing wealth also has to do with international security and the independence of the nation. All these things kings are not supposed to do.
That's right.
Because they're supposed to trust God, because God is going to take care of Israel, right?
And if we have a
so now we can look at leaders. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to keep going.
Well, I was going to say, and now we can kind of look at leaders around us and say, well, where do we see, like, Jane and Joe Schmoes who are doing this kind of stuff, and what is Scripture now saying about those people, right?
And it's not that those people who could be identified by us with greater or lesser degrees of accuracy, we're imperfect interpreters, are the beast, but that they are beastly. They're beastly. They're beast-like. They're manifesting, and then that for Christians should be, oh, let's pump the brakes. We don't want to be like that. We don't want to be people like that. We don't want to, have to live under people like that, whatever. So I think there's actually all kinds of real positive benefits from knowing these texts better, so that they're activated in our brain. And I think at the back to that strong level intertextuality, the biblical authors want us to know these texts. They want those other texts to activate in our brain, and it's a shorthand. It's when Martin Luther King Jr. can build to a crescendo and say, let justice roll down like waters, righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. He's evoking, that's a great line, but he didn't make it up. It's from Amos. And if you know, you know. And Amos is like the most articulate prophet of judgment I think we have in the Bible. And it is just judgment all the way down, and it's judgment because of the mistreatment of the poor. And if you can evoke Amos like that with just one verse, you're that's just doing all kinds of rhetorical theological work for you. But if you don't know, and all that's lost. And I saw a poll not long ago that most people think that line, Martin Luther King Jr. made up, that's his original line.
Yeah,
they don't know that it comes from any place else.
I mean, most Christians think that Jesus made up the idea of love your neighbor as yourself.
Yes, there you go. That's right. Yeah, that's a famous one, right?
Yeah. I mean, so this is happening in Scripture. I think you actually just gave us, the audience of the Biblical Mind, like the most culturally relevant way to unlock intertextuality. It's all if you know, you know, right? I'm speaking in such a way in which I think you should be picking up what I'm laying down, but no individual speech can do all the heavy lifting. I mean, we've all read academic stuff where people are trying to explain everything under the sun that fits into their thesis. So you are always doing this kind of, okay, if you know what you know, in reference to this or that.
And that pays off in the pulpit for preaching too, because if people know some things, you don't have to like rehearse, ABC every Sunday. I mean, you can go on to the deeper things. You can leave the milk behind, as Paul would say, and go on to real spiritual food. So and I have to say that in my life as a Christian, I've often longed for a little more of the spiritual food and less recapitulation of the milk.
Yeah.